Hello and welcome to Experts Corner. This is Maheen Jafri. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at the Pakistan and Afghanistan round of talks at Istanbul. Pakistan has handed over solid evidence-based demands to the mediators, which they are discussing with Afghanistan point by point. But also at the same time, we're seeing that the Afghan Taliban has opened fire at the border of Jammu, and it has resulted in the death of 2 people on the Pakistani side, which is of course seen as a threat to the fragile ceasefire and the dialogue process that is happening right now. We are going to be discussing about that. And in our second segment, we are going to be taking a look at the Gaza situation, where Israel has vowed to destroy Hamas's tunnels. Also, it is pounding southern Khan Yunis, and it has rejected 107 requests towards the aid delivery in the Gaza Strip. 15,000 people or more are still in the need of emergency evacuation on medical basis. President Trump has at the same time said that he expects international stabilization force to soon enter Gaza, and he says that the ceasefire is working out well. Now, we need to see how well is the ceasefire working, and how would these violations continue to happen even if the international stabilization force enters the Gaza Strip. Now, for further analysis, we are joined by our experts. In studio, we have Jawad Tehami. And also online, we have Barrister Fatima Shaheen and our guest, senior journalist Mubashir Zaidi. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining in. Mubashir Zaidi, we'll start from you. Looking at the third round between Pakistan and Afghanistan, it's a very sensitive and serious round to be happening, and yet we see the violation of the ceasefire. How would you comment firstly on that?
Well, first of all, it shows that Taliban are not getting any understanding of the situation, not even from the mediators, not from Pakistan. Pakistan has been acting very responsibly into it when they told mediators whatever was happening on the ground. In the first 2 rounds, as well as what happened yesterday, Pakistan has shared all the evidence it has about the violation of the ceasefire by the Taliban and the bases where Afghan Taliban have been shielding banned TTP and BLA terrorists over there. So the question is not that the evidence isn't there. The question is that Afghan Taliban are still not realizing that despite pressure from the mediators, they are unwilling to get stock of the situation, which means that Pakistan will be left with no option but to then carry out strikes on the terrorist hideouts within Afghanistan. When Pakistan did that last time, Afghans came back to us saying that we need to stop it and they will do something about it. But again, they didn't do anything. They are not willing to provide us with a guarantee, not even to the mediators, that from now on, they will rein in terrorist groups within the Afghan soil and will not allow incursions into Pakistan. So what we are witnessing here in Istanbul is that the talks are still stalled, and Pakistan side is awaiting because mediators are sitting with the Afghan Taliban to work out a proposal that would create some sort of a stability across the border with Afghanistan and force Afghanistan to accept some pressure from the mediators not to allow or the terrorists to go across and rein in the militant groups there.
Right, Mr. Zaidi, this is Jawad Tehami. I'm curious that this recent deterioration between Pakistan and owing to that very act of aggression on the part of the Afghan Taliban happened most recently. How do you think that India factor is at play when we talk about these back-to-back rounds of negotiations owing to the shuttle diplomacy from both sides haven't yielded any sort of a positive result as of yet, and there seems to be quite stubbornness on the part of the interim Afghan authorities, the de facto authorities, Afghan Taliban. So that particular aggression on the part of the Afghan Taliban happened when their interim Afghan foreign minister was there in India. How bigger a factor of India is at play at this particular point in time when it comes to Afghan Taliban's stubbornness?
Well, I think it is a very big factor in this because Taliban, as we have witnessed over the past few weeks, have been trying to cozy up to India on different fronts. And when we tried to object to it, and they were saying that they're a sovereign um, regime and they can go wherever they want to. But so Pakistan doesn't have anything against for them to going for trade or other uh, relations with India. The only factor is that once India finances the terrorists within Afghanistan soil to launch attacks across the border in Pakistan, that is where our problem lies. And we have given several dossiers to the international organizations, including the UN, and to different countries as well. Uh, just like here, even with the mediators, we have shared some proofs that how India is actually helping Afghan Taliban to guard the bases of the terrorists over there and then pushing them to go hostile towards Pakistan. This is a big factor, but again, Afghan Taliban have also have their um, uh, own kind of stubbornness, which stems from the fact that they say that they had defeated USSR, formerly USSR, and now Russia during the 80s, and then forced US out of Afghanistan. So they are still thinking that they can do whatever they want to, and Pakistan will not respond. But Pakistan has shown them over the last few weeks that what can we do, and if they don't agree to a mechanism to control terrorists inside their border, then I think they're in for trouble. But and that's what the mediators have been telling them as well, that there's a ceasefire. Pakistan's demands are reasonable. All you need is to take action on your soil and not let terrorists cross into Pakistan. And then Pakistan obviously has to guard their borders as well, not to let terrorists in. So Taliban have been escaping away from agreeing to a written proposal in this regard. Mediators try to tone down the some points of the proposal or the mechanism that will come out once the talks are over. But Afghans are still very stubborn, the Taliban. They're not agreeing to it and saying that it's not their responsibility to control terrorists crossing into Pakistan. It is actually the responsibility of Pakistan not to let those terrorists in. And they have repeatedly said that Pakistan needs to give us evidence. And Pakistani delegation told them that over the past few months, we have been regularly sharing evidence with you. The moment Pakistan points out a terrorist base used by TTP or BLA in Afghanistan, Afghan Taliban actually let them move to another safe haven. So, what
Mr. Mubashir Zaidi, also we'd like to continue to build up on the point when you were saying that they seem to be under an illusion and they are stubborn. Clearly, they are getting their instructions from the Kabul leadership, and when they've been told that do not commit on anything that you cannot fulfill, what does that mean? What does that show about their mentality? Are they not serious enough, or are they really, is it some kind of, farce thing that's going on?
Well, they think that, first of all, you said Kabul. I think they have two power centers, one in Kabul and one in Kandahar. So whatever the Afghan delegation here, they are shuttling their messages between Kandahar and Kabul. So within themselves, there's a problem. But more than that, I think Afghan Taliban, as I said, are not realizing the severity of the situation. They're thinking that they can sort of make excuses that would not push Pakistan to dig deep into Afghanistan to strike there. But Pakistan has said it is enough for them. I mean, we have tried to convey them politely initially, even with evidence, proofs of the hideouts, everything, and they're still kind of looking the other way They're not realizing, as I said before, the severity of the situation. So Afghan Taliban are uh, even to the mediators. A couple of times, mediators had shared the agreement with us. And what happened yesterday in Chaman, you could see what is coming, what kind of illusion that they are in. They're firing into it because of their own domestic compulsions, because they don't have a stable economy, they don't have money. The only thing to keep people from criticizing them is to whip up a rhetoric against Pakistan and say that whatever bad is happening in Afghanistan is because of Pakistan, despite the fact that the world knows that Pakistan has been hosting Afghan refugees for over 4 decades now. And we have a very brotherly relation. We still consider them a friendly country, but Afghan Taliban.
We have on panel with us Barrister Fatima Shaheen. Barrister Fatima Shaheen, we'll take your comment as well, but if you want to put forward a question to senior journalist Mubashir Zaidi.
Thank you for that, Maheen. The question that I would want to put is that in the event that these talks fail, how do you see us proceeding further? What options do you feel can Pakistan then utilize, be it with regards to expanding the contours of the country who could be involved so as to exert more diplomatic pressure, or be it with regards to exercising its right under international law? Because we do understand that this whole debate has a very important aspect of international law attached to it as well.
Well, Fatima, the talks are maybe stalled and there may be hiccups. They may have hit roadblocks, but let's still hope that something would be agreed between Afghan Taliban and Pakistan so that the kind of situation that will go after these talks either collapse or the level of negotiations between the two countries is cut off. That will be a dangerous situation, not for Pakistan, but for Afghanistan. We have just given them a couple of hints in the past when we struck terrorist hideouts in Afghanistan, particularly in Paktika province, where most of the terrorists are hiding. But they still believe the Afghans are not agreeing to give us guarantee to rein in those terrorist groups. So Pakistan will be eventually left with no choice if the talks collapse or these negotiations end. That Pakistan has to then do whatever it has been threatening to do, is that then it will strike those terrorist hideouts at will. And you've seen Pakistani military and Pakistani state has been a very, very responsible one. They don't do carpet bombing like the US did or the NATO allies did. We have information about where the terrorists are hiding, where the camps are. And we have been in the past sharing those information with the Afghans, but Afghans are not doing any action on it. And there have been instances where Pakistan had given the information and Afghans have relocated those terrorists to another place. So Pakistan has this thing in mind as well, that we have been sharing evidence with them, but they're not taking action on it. So that's what we've been telling mediators here, that we need a mechanism under which, just like last time, the statement that was issued said that if someone involved in ceasefire violation, a penalty will be imposed on the warring party. In that case, if some attack happens from across the border, then Pakistan has every right to go back to the mediators and ask for some action, as they're promising. But mediators, as I told you, along with Pakistan, are still trying to save those talks to agree on a mechanism that would ensure that there could be some sort of a system rather than a war between the two neighborly, brotherly Islamic countries that will ensure that both countries exchange information about the terrorist hideouts and the terrorists who comes across from Afghanistan, So this is the bone of contention here. This is the only point that Afghan Taliban are not realizing, that Pakistan has given the evidence. All Pakistan is needing a guarantee from Afghan Taliban that terrorists will not get across Pakistan to launch attacks, to plan and mastermind the attacks within Afghan soil. And we have seen our agreements in the past which says so. So I don't understand why Afghan Taliban are not willing to give us a guarantee. I mean, we are willing to provide a guarantee that we will make sure that all border, whatever happened in the border, where we will have a
points that you have highlighted regarding the role of the mediators in this entire equation. They have actually tried their best in order to save these ongoing talks between the two sides. Now, once we hope that you have already expressed your hope as well, that we are looking forward that these talks yield a positive result and a certain mechanism is formed, that the counterterrorism cooperation between the two sides happen and the Afghan Taliban fulfill those commitments, whatever the mechanism at the end of these talks is basically reached. In that sort of a case, how do you think, how much influence the mediators would be able to do once this mechanism or a framework agreement between the two sides is reached? Would they be able to pressurize the interim Afghan authorities to abide by the provisions of any sort of an agreement? Because given the track record, it was the Doha Accord that the Afghan Taliban also reached with the international community. But over the last 4 years, they have been continuously violating that. Also, there is another aspect. The reason regarding their stubbornness, do you think they are looking forward to have some sort of incentive from Pakistan's side that they are being stubborn during these round of talks? And what those incentives do you think could possibly be they are looking forward to have from Pakistan? Because Pakistan has been doing so much over the recent past as well. We have upgraded the diplomatic relations with them as well.
Well, first of all, the mediators, if I speak about them, you know, Qatar, as you said, holds an office of the Taliban over there, and they can actually twist Afghan Taliban's arm by not cutting on their funds or things like these. But mediators are still trying to. Same goes for Turkey. Both mediators are still exercising restraint. So Pakistan and Afghan Taliban will eventually agree on a mechanism. That's why I told you that there have been certain points that have been diluted in this round. So make sure that there is an agreement. But if Afghan Taliban continue with their stubbornness, I can see that the mediators would actually then force Taliban to agree to something. And if they don't, then Qatar has a leverage of cutting funds on them. What Afghan Taliban in return have been very outrageous in their demands, asking for more money, asking for their recognition, which obviously is not possible unless the United Nations agree to accept them as a legitimate government. So, and whatever they are doing to women in Afghanistan and with stopping the girls' education, I don't see any point that the UN or any international body will recognize them. So this is what on one side, they're not trying to give, they're hesitating to give us a written guarantee not to allow attacks from their soil. On the other side, they're trying to blackmail, particularly Qatar, to give them more money and a recognition as well. So mediators have been telling them that, look, these things would come later. First, you have to give Pakistan some sort of an assurance that you will rein in those TTP and BLA terrorist groups on your soil. And they side with Pakistan because Pakistan has evidence. Pakistan has shared evidence with them. And what happened in Chaman, even yesterday, Pakistan told them that, look, they not only they're unwilling to provide us some sort of a guarantee, they're being hostile towards us. On this, the mediators are furious with Afghan Taliban, but then still I believe, and this is obviously based on the information, that despite the fact Pakistan and the mediators are trying to salvage these talks, because talks would eventually, we have to come to a table, whether it's after some sort of an action by Pakistan. So it's better that the Afghan Taliban should realize this, has come back on the table as they did.
Mr. Mubashir Zaidi, building on the point where you mentioned that, the seriousness where you were talking about TTP and relocation, do you see this as some kind of tactic? Because if they're relocating them in the urban population, and if the talks collapse for any reason, and then if Pakistan takes action against TTP, is it not a pretext to create that Pakistan is now attacking on the civilian population, firstly? And secondly, a quick question, how do you see it moving forward after this attack on Chaman?
Well, as I told you, that all those terrorists, whether it's BLA or whether it's TTP, they had fought alongside Afghan Taliban against the US and allied forces. So Afghan Taliban are sympathetic towards them more than towards the government of Pakistan, which I don't understand. Why is it? But they are not willing to actually hand them over to Pakistan, or they insist on protecting, although they never say it publicly, but they know who the commanders of the TTP are and where they are hiding. But whenever Pakistan and the mediators confront them with the evidence, they say that we have no idea, the whole country is not under our control, and it's about some warlords controlling some parts of Afghanistan, but we have control in Kandahar or Kabul. So I think they are dilly-dallying on the evidence, as well as on the argument that they have to ultimately take the responsibility on reining in terrorist organizations on their operating on their soil. And I agree with you totally once you say that they will eventually take these terrorists and put them in a civilian areas. And if Pakistan would attack, they would, then cry foul, saying that, Pakistan is attacking civilians.
Right. Thank you very much, Mr. Mubashir Zaidi, senior journalist, for joining us and letting us know the situation that he thinks, how he thinks the dialogues are going to be as it is underway. Now, Barrister Fatima Shaheen, we know the negotiations, the rounds are underway, yet we see ceasefire violation happening from the other side. What is the legal perspective to it?
Before that, Maheen, one thing I wanted to ask, because I do understand that there's, shortage of time. One thing I would want to add before, I proceed to your question. I think here what is very important to talk about is the fact that, whereas, of course, Afghanistan, by virtue of Afghan Taliban, is not being recognized as a proper government under the UN contours, what is very important is that we cannot ignore the fact that this doesn't evade Pakistan's right, being the United Nations Security Council member, to actually raise its own concerns regarding the terrorism that Afghanistan is actually committing. And this is something that I wanted to add and put to the previous speaker before me as well. Moving on now to talk about the legal options. I think, first of all, as we have seen and as Pakistan is already exercised, it has that right to exercise, its right of self-defense very well under Article 51 of the UN Charter, which says that if any territory, is attacked, and if the sovereignty of any state is attacked, it does have a right to respond, that to ensuring that it is something which is necessary, it is proportionate, and it is immediate. And Pakistan, as we have seen, has fulfilled the entire litmus test. Now, looking at other options, when we do talk about other legal options, I think here what is very important to then talk about, and this is something that we were discussing yesterday too, that when it comes to demarcating and talking about the terms of the agreement which Pakistan, we are hoping, might at some point reach with Afghanistan, what is very important is that what kind of enforcement mechanisms does Pakistan actually exercise and put into that very agreement. And when we talk about these mechanisms, I think here something which the previous speaker also said, what we do need to pass focus upon is how we can use regional powers, not only limited to Qatar and Turkey, who are actually facilitating these talks, but also going towards China, towards Iraq, towards Russia, so as to overall, exert more diplomatic pressure and to ensure that, Afghanistan, in the event that it end up giving us, any written assurances, it is actually executing those through. Lastly, I think when we do talk about this from a legal perspective, although it will be difficult for us to go that option because, despite the fact that we have very concrete, very verifiable evidence, the mediators also, actually endorse our stance, would be possibly an, option to go to the ICJ. But for that, particularly Afghanistan would need to consent to the jurisdiction of ICJ, and there needs to be again a treaty and agreement between the two countries to do just that. So overall, if I was to sum up this whole thing, I think what Pakistan should focus upon is, in the event that, God forbid, these talks do fail, it should keep on exercising its right of self-defense. And number two, it should raise its concerns in front of the United Nations Security Council through its periodic reporting. And number three, I think something which the Pakistani government has very rightly so done is the fact that they have actually tightened cross-border controls, and that is something that they can continue doing so as to exert economic pressure on Afghanistan. And in addition to that, I think something which is also good in part of the government is the fact that, they've also ensured that now all the undocumented Afghan nationals, they are going back. So these are measures which do deserve, credit on part of the Pakistani state and the Pakistani government. And these, I think, are very decisive in also putting forward the fact that Pakistan now is not only willing to act, but it is also willing to take further action so as to, protect its territory and, of course, its people too.
Absolutely right. Now, Jawad Tehami, coming to you, how do you give your analysis based on the current discussion that we had with our guests?
Okay, there are three straight away the dimensions I would like to bring your attention to. Firstly, when it comes to dependence, the dependence is when we try to weigh as to which side the dependence is, although it is an independence, Pakistan and Afghanistan share a long border. Now, that dependence is actually more of Afghanistan on Pakistan because Pakistan has been hosting millions of refugees for over the years also. When it comes to the trade partnership, the transit trade, again, Afghanistan is dependent. Afghanistan is a landlocked country. Pakistan has tried its best to make it from landlocked to a land-linked country, also extended the China-Pakistan economic corridor so that the humanitarian and the economic crisis within Afghanistan could be overcome. So when it comes to dependency, Afghanistan in so many ways, geographically, when it comes to trade, when it comes to the familiar relations across the border as well, it is dependent on Pakistan. So there must be a realization among the Afghan Taliban ranks that it has to have good relations with Pakistan rather than going into the lap of Indians, where there doesn't seem to be any natural convergence of interest between Afghanistan's people and Indians. Second is when it comes to usurping the power. Now, Afghan Taliban had been usurping the power on two fronts. When it comes to the Doha Accord, it was their obligation to bring all the stakeholders and form an all-inclusive government. They have been unable to do so, not only been unable to do so, but miserably been failed over the last 4 years. It's a quite considerable time. Had there been an all-inclusive government in place over there, the situation could have been a lot better.
And what is the second segment that you wanted to highlight besides the inclusive government in the usurping of power?
There is an internal division within the Afghan Taliban's ranks.
Right.
Now, there is a tug of war between the two ranks going on, as was mentioned by Mr. Zaidi as well. There are two power centers in Kandahar and in Kabul. So there is a tug of war going on. It is a power struggle based on different ethnicities and based on different factions. And that is also causing a huge problem within the ranks. That's why perhaps they're being unable to reach to any sort of a concrete understanding or a unanimity of a view when it comes to dealing with Pakistan. So the third thing is very important. It comes to international obligations. It was, we have seen recently Moscow format happening. We've got the regional anti-terrorism structure under the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. We have also seen tripartite talks between Pakistan, China, and the interim Afghan authorities happening. In all these forums, there has been one major concern from Pakistan, there has to be a concrete and a decisive action against the terrorist groups, especially when it comes to Fitna al-Khawarij, Band Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and there has to be a guarantee on the part of the Afghan Taliban. They've been unable to do so. Now, there are multiple reports by the United Nations that tell that there has been an acquiescence on the part of the Afghan Taliban and the Band Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. That needs to be done, and there needs to be a unanimity of the understanding when it comes to the US, Russia, China, Pakistan, Iran, and other neighboring countries.
Thank you very much, Jawad, for brilliantly giving us this analysis. He highlighted different dynamics of why Afghanistan should really be serious in these talks, because it is dependent on Pakistan in a lot of different ways, and now we need to see, the entire world needs to see an inclusive government. The second segment, as we told you earlier, will be about the ongoing happenings in Gaza. What is Israel doing? It has really, vowed to take down Hamas's tunnels, and also President Donald Trump has said something important, that he is expecting the International Stabilization Force soon on Gaza. We've been joined by former Ambassador to United States and United Nations, Sardar Masood Khan. Thank you so much for joining in.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, as we see the statement coming from President Donald Trump when he talks about the International Stabilization Force, and he says that the ceasefire violation is working out very well. How well do you think is working, and how soon are you expecting the International Stabilization Force?
The ceasefire is very fragile, and the terminology has changed. Initially, when the 20-point formula was presented by President Trump, it was called International Stabilization Force. But the proposal that has been floated in the United Nations Security Council, it calls for the establishment of an international security force, which means that it would not be a peacekeeping force, it would be an enforcement force. So there's a difference in the responsibilities. The United Nations normally deploys peacekeeping missions. So, which means that the situation in the Gaza territory would continue to be volatile, and the role that is being given to this security force is to maintain peace and security, but at the same time kind of manage borders along Gaza's borders along Israel and Egypt, and it would train a police force which would work with it, Gazan police force. So as I said, that it's still up to the Security Council members, both permanent and non-permanent, to come up with a formula which would be acceptable to all 15 members of the Council, and there would be no veto. And if this resolution is passed, countries like Pakistan and Indonesia and Turkey could join that force, because this is what they wanted to do. So that's where we are right now.
Right. So, Sardar Masood Khan, 107 requests of aid has been denied by Israel, and we've also come to know that UAE plans to expand the aid shipments. So, no matter how much the countries are trying to mediate and come to resolve and, trying to bring the aid in, but if 107 requests are being denied from Israel, how do you think that's going to work? Especially provided that we are in the middle of that first stage and we are trying to enter the second one.
Well, the second phase of the peace proposal or the peace package has not been operationalized fully. 54% of the Gazan territory is under the occupation of Israel. So it's still an occupied territory. And they have to withdraw. At least this is what they say, that they have to withdraw after the start of the second phase. So there are other problems also, as you have rightly pointed out, that humanitarian access is being denied. One of the tasks of the International Security Force would be to ensure that the humanitarian corridors are not interrupted. So, but that would be under the Board of Peace. Board of Peace would be presided over by President Trump, and there would be a governance structure there, in which Palestinian technocrats would have some representation, and they would take day-to-day decisions. Now, this is a very complex governance structure because, previously, before this peace plan, Gaza was, or before October the 7th, 2023, Gaza was ruled by Hamas, and there was a clear governance structure. But Now, I think that Hamas and all other organizations would be decommissioned, disarmed, and Gaza would have no independent security force. And the added problem is that the territories of Gaza and the occupied Palestinian territory are disconnected. And there's no contiguity in these two parts. And the Palestine Authority or the Palestine Liberation Organization, which are recognized by the Arab League and the United Nations and OIC, they are being given no role in Gaza because they represent the popular sentiment, nor the Hamas. So it's going to, and there is, well, we see very clearly that neither Israel nor the United States will support a two-state solution. They have stopped talking about it, and they're talking about a one-state solution. But as far as Israel is concerned, I'm not referring to the United States in this context. Israel would rather have an apartheid state with some of its pockets with the Israeli settlers rather than have two-state solution.
Right. Sardar Masood Khan, also we know that in the name of Hamas's tunnel, Israel is violating, it's happening every day, be it the World Food Kitchen where they're still killing the women and children, be it the farmers in the West Bank. They are pounding Southern Khan Yunis, they are pounding Eastern Gaza in the name of and under the pretext of all this. Now, how do you see this affecting the population which is already displaced?
Well, I would say that Israel accepted this peace plan under duress and in the face of mounting international criticism. You would recall that many of the European countries, which used to be traditionally supporters of Israel, they withdrew their support. They started canceling arms and armaments shipments to Israel, and Israel's technology sector was suffering, and so Israel was suffering. I mean, there were no sanctions, but it was the measures that were taken by the European countries and Western allies of the United States, they were hurting Israel. So it accepted this peace plan under duress. Its original plan remains intact, that there should be no autonomy for Gaza and there should be no authority, I mean, real authority or real sovereignty for the occupied Palestinian territory. So it is using its tested and tried playbook to implement its policies in Gaza, but it still occupies.
Excellency, Mr. Khan, when we talk about Israel's approach in this entire equation, now since President Donald Trump took over the office back in January, an earlier ceasefire was reached, it held for 2 months, and then it was violated by Israel. Now another ceasefire has been reached. Now, as far as the U.S. perspective is concerned, they've put in a lot of efforts. It's quite a comprehensive peace plan. President Donald Trump also talks that this particular international stabilization force, as per that peace plan, is going to be sooner on the ground. Do you think, with the given violations of this second ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, around over 200 times, in which 236 innocent Palestinians have been killed since 10th of October, do you think Israel would allow or let such type of force, which could ultimately train the Gazans police in order to oversee the things further in the future, to let it happen? And if that happens, Israel doesn't allow this international stabilization force to be instituted over there, despite there happens to be a UN resolution, the draft of which the US side has already submitted. Do you think the US administration would be in sort of a position in order to impress upon the Israeli regime in order to let the institutionalization of ISF there?
Well, I would like to divide my answer in 3 parts. First is that the stakes for President Trump are very high because he took this initiative. And although Israel was not willing to sign up on a peace package or peace plan, but he persuaded Mr. Netanyahu to accept this plan. So The reputation of President Trump and his credibility are at stake. So he will try his best that this peace plan or the UN resolution works. Second is the 8 countries, including Pakistan, which lobbied with President Trump on the sidelines of the United Nations to intercede and to come up with a plan to stop the carnage and genocide in Gaza. And that prompted, finally, President Trump to take decisive actions. So we are seeing that all those plans that he laid out are unfolding one by one. The third is your question, and this is the most important question, that would Israel collaborate with the international security force? Would it let it work? Now, it's a very complex situation. As far as Israel is concerned, it would try its best to ensure that it doesn't succeed, or at least it doesn't erode Israel's writ and occupation of the territory, because Gaza is surrounded by Israel. So it would be cordoned off, and it would be under lockdown in any case. And the Gazans that they would appoint in the governance structure, they would have very limited authority. So it would be an unrepresentative structure there in any case. I think that if I recall correctly, in the past, United Nations experimented with such security forces in DRC, in Uganda, in Central Africa, also in other parts of Africa. But this is for the first time that a security force would be deployed in the Middle East or in the Palestinian territory. So Israel would be watching very closely. I don't think that it would change course, or it would change its strategy vis-a-vis the Gazans or the occupied Palestinian territory. But
Barrister Fatima Shaheen, if you want to put forward a question.
I would want to ask him something. Sir, I've been listening very carefully to what you were saying. I just had 2 very quick questions to put to you. One would be the fact that, I would want to delve onto this with regards to Pakistan's participation, possible participation in the ISF. At one end, we do see that, Pakistan has been a part of such peacekeeping missions before. And of course, participation on part of Pakistan would further advocate and strengthen its stance for Palestinian people and having a 2-state solution. But what would, on the converse, also perhaps might be the risks that Pakistan needs to look out for very pragmatically. And number 2, sir, if you do study the resolution and overall the peace agreement, the making of the Board of Peace, there are still quite a few questions which are left unanswered. For example, we don't know that if the ISF forces of various countries go there and in the course of being there, there are some ceasefire being committed, then what would happen? How would all these forces actually act? And number 2, I think a bone of contention here, which we do need to address in this regard, is also the disarming of Hamas, which various Muslim countries have raised to be a matter of concern. So how would you look at this with respect to Pakistan participating or not participating in it? And number 2, onto these gray areas which still need to be answered.
Well, very good questions. As a matter of fact, the first is Pakistan's participation. Pakistan right now is walking on eggshells. It's very careful. And it has signaled that hypothetically, it hasn't signaled definitively, and hypothetically it has said that if it participates, it would be under the umbrella of the United Nations if a Security Council resolution is passed. And that then they would look at the content of the resolution. It's not that just they would blindly follow the direction of the United Nations Security Council, because you have to take into account so many factors, domestic and international, and our commitment to the people of Palestine and to the Arab world and to the Islamic world. So Pakistan would make this decision very carefully, and it is taking this decision, or this, decision before the actual decision, in line with what Germany or Indonesia or Turkey would like to do, a United Nations mandate. The second question is very interesting because you're talking about the practicability of this resolution, or the implementation of this resolution, or the effectiveness of this international security force. So it would be a tall order for the international security force to deliver. And you've rightly pointed out that if there are violations, let's say by Israel, You know, Israel is becoming a party to this. I suppose they would become a party to this resolution. They would endorse it. But the biggest threat that Gazans have is from Israel. And therefore, if there is any violation, the peacekeeping, for it's not a peacekeeping, peace enforcing force, it would be a very daunting task for it to manage Israel. I mean, on the other side, you have Egypt, but Egypt would be manageable easily, Israel would not.
Right. Jawad Tehami, how do you see the complications when we talk about the, this stabilization force? Thank you so much, Mr. Sardar Masood Khan, former ambassador to the United States and United Nations, for joining us and letting us know your views.
Well, actually, the major stumbling block is unwillingness on the part of Israeli regime when it comes to the institutionalization of such a force over there. There was a very pertinent point that was mentioned by Barrister Fatima also. That sort of scenario, when it comes to the practicability of this particular entire institutionalization of international stabilization force over there, for instance, there happens to be, given the track record, even if it is institutionalized over there, whether it has got the backing of the United States of America, and there is a mandate that has been backed by the United Nations Security Council also through a resolution, there are ultimately going to be violations on the part of Israelis. As we have seen, there were preliminary injunctions when it comes to International Court of Justice, asking, asking in very concrete terms the Israeli regime to refrain from carrying out genocidal acts in the Gaza enclave. It did not abide by. There were very strong worded statements on the part of the United Nations Secretary General also regarding the genocide and whatever was happening on the part of Israeli regime. Rather than listening and giving heed to and doing something practically to correct its actions, it rather went on a rampage and started criticizing the United Nations Secretary General himself as well. Despite the institutionalization of that particular force happens in Gaza's enclave, there are going to be violations on the part of the Israeli regime. More interestingly, it is going to be very important to see how the individual countries which are going to be the part of that international stabilization force going to react. Is it going to also affect the bilateral relationship of any of those countries who have that relationship with Israel, and what sort of impact it is going to have on the broader region as well?
Like Barrister Fatima Shaheen, we were talking about International Court of Justice. It has issued very clear statements. It reminded Israel of its international obligations. How can we really bind Israel? This time, what do you see in a single line comment if you would give your feedback?
I think here, Maheen, one thing I would want to say, I think ICJ judgments have been issued before as well, but what remains to be seen or what remains to be actually enforced is political engagement and diplomatic pressures. But one thing very quickly that I would want to add here, which I feel is extremely important within the contours of this entire debate, is the fact that if you study the text of the resolution which has been put forward by the US, it clearly, at least in my opinion as a lawyer, doesn't fall within the contours of mandate of UN. One in which, the resolution, in the event that it is passed, it would be binding, because it doesn't fall and it doesn't speak the language of those binding resolutions. That is Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. So for me as a lawyer, a matter of concern would also be that in the event that this resolution is passed as it is, there might be questions of its enforceability with regards to states going back and saying that no, we conveniently don't want to comply with whatever was agreed upon in the UN resolution, or on the contrary, UN not being able to actually enforce the same too. So what we do need to talk about perhaps, at some other time, is the fact that what are the contours within which this resolution is being passed by UN, and whether UN at the end of the day will have that binding power to get it enforced.
Right. Thank you very much, Barrister Fatima Shaheen and Jawad Tehami, both of you, for joining in and giving your precious views. This was about the latest situation in the Gaza Strip. Of course, when President Trump talks about the international stabilization force, there are lots of dynamics to it, especially when it comes to the operationalization, when it comes to the implementation. There are lots of complications still that we need to look at, and we hope that things get better with time. This was all for tonight's show. Maheen Jafri signing off.